All right, so why don't you give the listeners a little intro into who you are and how you got started doing Bhangra?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Nimit Desai. I'm the captain of Buckeye Bhangra. Let's see, how did I get started? So I got started in high school actually. One of my friends, Karam Patla, his parents had started a Bhangra team with him and his friends when they were in like ninth grade. And so one of their dancers dropped out of the competition they were going to go to. And I had been doing Ross up until that point. And so he just like messaged me on Facebook. And I didn't really know him that well. And he was just like, hey, you want to dance? I heard you have danced before. And so I had like a month or like 2 months maybe to like learn how to do Bhangra and then go to a competition. We ended up going to BOB juniors and we got just absolutely smacked by FCB and DCMPA. But yeah, that's sort of like how I got started. And then after that, I mean, he had graduated, so I stuck with the team, Gajdi Jawani in Cincinnati. Yeah, I mean, once I got to college, it was like, I had already put in so much time and effort, and I really enjoyed doing Bhangra more so than any other dance type I'd really ever done. That, it seemed
Hmm.
kind of obvious that I would join a Bhangra team and sort of try and pursue that. Yeah.
So wait, BOP doesn't happen anymore, right? That was just like something that used to happen back in the day. They just chose like it was like an invite-only comp kind of thing.
Right, right. So like it was like what, 2012. We actually competed against like UNC's captain Sahil and like a lot of the FCB boys. Like I actually competed against them all the way back then, so it's kind of funny. I
Wow. So
lost
like
to them then. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that rivalry is deep, dude. It runs deep, man. I lost to them then. I lost to them now. Yeah. Oh man,
so
it's too
I'm
tough,
assuming like
dude.
Akash and Rohan were
Yeah,
eventing.
yeah.
Oh, and wait, and didn't Rom dance for the
Yeah,
so-called
yeah,
juniors team?
actually, yeah, yeah, dude, I hate Rom. Yeah, he's so old. What was he doing there? Like, it doesn't make any sense, He should be dancing at that competition. That's out of control, He was cheating. That's essentially what
Classic.
happened. Yeah, we lost because they cheated. That's what happened. And that's also what happened at every other competition we competed against FCB. They always cheated. That's just what it is.
Bending the rules, man.
Yeah, yeah, bending the rules. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's
Um,
sort of how I got going.
okay. Which also, since you mentioned Karam's name, I should take the
hmm
time to apologize to Karam on the podcast. And we did record an interview with him many months
Right.
ago, and I don't know if that interview is ever going to really air. We can re-record one with him. So pretty much you went into college and you started dancing for Buckeye right away?
Yeah, yeah. So I joined my freshman year. The team was like very newly co-ed. Like they had been to like one competition the year before. They went to R2B2. A lot of the team was actually also like relatively new to Bhangra. I mean, to the circuit in general. So we actually did make it to blowout that year. Which was crazy. I mean, we all had a lot of fun, but the team definitely had its struggles. We weren't really able to pull up any placings or anything like that. So yeah, I think after that year, I was really set on sort of like trying to pick up a leadership role and see if I could kind of like move Buckeye Bhangra away from like or like sort of into the center of the circuit. Try and get us to be like a relevant team going forward. So yeah, I mean that freshman year experience was actually pretty crucial.
So, so pretty much your freshman year, you did a couple small comps, but you guys made it to blowout that year. So that was kind of
Right.
maybe sort of a. Do you consider that to be more of a breakout moment, or maybe the next fall for you guys?
Yeah,
We.
I think. Okay. So we went to blowout that year, but we weren't necessarily. We were an okay team, I think. But we didn't really have anything special. I think people didn't really view us. People kind of viewed us as like a normal, co-ed, the co-ed collegiate team. We didn't really do anything outside the box. I think
Mhm.
it was that next fall we went to Berg and we sort of brought like a different sort of choreography that people may not have been used to, or we actually started doing some stuff that maybe people hadn't seen that people really started to take notice of. Maybe there's another team coming up in Ohio. So I think that was sort of more of our
Nice,
breakout
nice.
moment, I guess.
So, and you guys got new Vardis and stuff that fall too,
Right,
right?
right,
So you
yeah,
kind of just
yeah.
like,
It was,
um,
yeah, it was kind of like a rebrand, like,
mhm.
yeah. So I was on the e-board, that coming year as a sophomore. And so I worked like day and night that summer. I was relentless. I mean, I don't think I'd ever worked so hard at anything in my life. But I was like I really wanted us to go to Berg. I really wanted us to be good. And so I spent so much time watching videos. Every day after work, I would go to like our recreation center, and I would just like spend like an hour or 2 hours just dancing with Karam or dancing with anybody else who was in Columbus. Just trying to like make sure that myself, like I was a good enough dancer that I could feel like I could, aptly teach other people on our team. I felt like that was the main first step that I wanted to take, was make sure that, as a dancer myself, I'm, if not accomplished, at least competent, right? So that, moving forward, people can at least respect, my ability to point out flaws or, to teach people how to do it. So yeah, that was sort of the first step.
So you're essentially making sure that you have the skills to be able to lead by example.
Right. And I think that became really crucial moving forward. I don't think it would have been possible for me, especially being, I was 18 when I took over, and everybody else on the team was older than me. So, it would have been tough, I think, moving forward, had I not tried to establish myself as a really solid dancer on the team, for me to really be a leader.
I don't want to get too sidetracked here, but in terms of, I know that there's some collegiate teams that I've like talked to on the circuit, and even independent teams who've like, they've had their ups and downs and their lulls, and especially collegiate teams, since the dancer turnover, their name might have been associated with a successful team in the past, or maybe their team didn't have much of a name before at all.
Right.
How did you guys, besides just getting new varieties and stuff, really go about this rebranding process so that people started like thinking of Buckeye as a different team than Buckeye was in the past?
Right. So I think, at first I felt like the only thing I really cared about doing was coming up with choreography. And I felt like that's what I didn't, to be frank, like I didn't really care that much about formations. I didn't really, that wasn't something that interested me. It wasn't something I was really pushing myself for. So when I sort of thought about, what we could be good at and what could kind of be our identity, I was like, well, if I love coming up with choreo, then, we should be a choreo heavy team. That should be something that we try and ride out. And so, I spent a lot of time, trying to make sure that our choreography, we sort of came up with this little bit of a formula where we would have like a segment would be comprised of like, not like a specific number, but you'd have a certain number of variations, of standard moves, and then you would have 8 beats of sort of a very interesting drop, like build up into a drop. So we would spend a lot of time trying to create creative build-ups, and then just at the drop, hit something that we know how to do, like double jaffa or pataka or something. And so, we started branding our team in terms of like, hey, we're a choreo heavy team. And, right away, the thing that I told everybody was that, we're not going to be the co-ed team that everyone's seen. Like, this is not something that kind of came about. Like, this is something that I think we all really wanted, was that, we're going to make a set that maybe an all guys team might do. Or maybe, it's going to be powerful. It's going to be energetic. It's going to be, it's going to be all out. And then, we're not really going to deal with the kind of graceful stuff. But we're going to be a co-ed team that does it. And I think everybody really bought into that. They wanted to kind of establish ourselves as having our own identity. We didn't want to be like a VCU style set. We weren't good enough dancers to just come out and just out dance people and just out grace people. So we kind of wanted to bring that sort of like the power aspect and sort of like, declare ourselves as a power dancing team. So that's sort of what we did. I think we spent a lot of time training dancers and teaching dancing form that first year, and I think that was sort of like what gave us a foundation for us to be successful in this past year.
So you guys went into this year thinking like, okay, we're rebranding the team, we're doing a lot of cool stuff, but you guys didn't have any major placings that year.
Right.
And now going into the year after that, this past year, where you guys were also like super successful this past year, but like before we get to like what did you guys do differently, one thing I want to know, like how did you guys keep your teammates sort of like almost trusting your leadership to an extent? Like did they were they still kind of thinking like, oh, like what Nimit and Karma and these other guys are doing, like, is it really working? Like, should we keep listening to them? You know?
Right. I think that was always, that was probably the toughest. And when we came back from Blowout and we had placed like 5th or 6th or something like that, and after having like what we all felt like was a relatively successful year, and it kind of ended that way. There were a lot of us that were, you know, a lot of people that may not, that were saying, you know, hey, maybe I might not come back to the team, you know, and I think it came down to, you know, I kind of tried to have a conversation with all the returning members before the year started. And I essentially said, hey, my bad. You know, like we had the right mindset. The execution wasn't there on my part in terms of set design. You guys all improved dramatically as dancers. And I think that we can do this moving forward if we just plan this out a little bit better. And so, you know, I think it was really a leap of faith on their part, which I'm really thankful for. I mean, I really, you know, considering how we didn't place that year, I was really happy that we had so many people choose to come back again and choose to kind of go for round 2. And I think us losing also was kind of made people pretty hungry. You know, people on our team were very unhappy, you know, when we didn't place at Blowout, which I thought was a good thing. Because the first time we went to Blowout, everyone was just like, oh, wow, we made it here. Thank God. You know, we're all high-fiving each other. We just got to dance. And then this next year, you know, we came back, we placed 5th, and everybody was upset, you know, going to even like right after the comp, you know, the faces of people, they were like, you know, we should have placed. And so, you know, that sort of hunger and, you know, there a little bit of faith in what we were doing, I think, people wanted to stay on board to see, because they felt like, you know, this is the best iteration of Buckeye Bhangra that we might have. So, you know, we wanted to see it all the way through.
So people bought into the idea, you know, like you had some people that fled the faith and were still willing to work hard and follow your direction.
Right.
So did you do any, like, because I remember sitting in the audience at AKD this past season, and I was not expecting, and I don't think anyone was expecting you guys to come on stage with the amount of, like, again, like your intro was just you guys like walking out and like standing there, like revving up, and right there, but like in just that swagger you guys kind of had from the get go, everyone was like, oh shit, like something crazy is about to happen, and then, you know, you guys start hype, go into the, you know, the Kunda breakdown, which everyone was shit for and stuff, but like, so obviously you guys killed it this year, but like, so what did you do anything differently, you think, like any key differences in your leadership style and your choreography, like how you built the set, your formula to, you know, everything, like, did anything really change?
Yeah, I think in terms of leadership style, my first year I wanted to win, but, you know, I was more focused on making sure that everybody learned how to dance well. I thought that was sort of my main goal. You know, I wanted to make sure that we established ourselves as a team. I thought we accomplished that. Wanted to make sure everybody was a good dancer, accomplished that. And then the second year, I wanted the mindset of the team to just be like, we're going to win and we're going to slaughter everybody at this competition. You know, like there was no Mr. Nice Guy anymore. I feel like everybody really came with like a competitive drive that I think we didn't really have the year before. And, you know, I think that was a big deal in terms of, you know, what kind of swagger we came into the competition with, what kind of energy we kind of had on stage. In terms of set design though, like, we changed a lot. I think we got I'll say the best and the worst critique from Sid I've ever gotten in my life, right? Because it was really funny. We went to Blowout, we didn't place, and he told us that and I quote him, that we blue balled him. We blue balled him. Like that's actually what he said, you know? And I remember like leaving the judges meeting and being like, what does that even mean? Like what kind of a stupid comment was that? Like I was so mad, you know? But then later when I really thought about it, I was like, well, you know, he kind of figured out our formula, you know, where we just do some variations, we come up with some good solid build-up choreo, and then we do something very basic at the drop. And so he was like, yeah, I mean, that's sort of what you guys ended up doing the whole time. And so coming into this year, you know, we had a conversation as a board, and we were like, we're just going to come up with the craziest set that we could possibly come up with. Every drop is going to be something that hopefully no one has ever seen before, and that's our goal. right? Like, hopefully whatever, no matter what it is, even if like good, bad, different, doesn't matter, like something that people haven't seen before, something, right? And so that's sort of how we try to go about building the set, where we would do something in our, our entrance segment that people don't come out, like co-ed teams don't really come out that fast, that intense, and without props, just straight up just dancing. And then like almost like an ending segment. And then like, our Kunde breakdown, hopefully we do something there that people haven't seen. And then, sub-segments, see if we can do something that people haven't seen, and just every segment, see if we can continue to build off of that. And so, once we had assembled our set after this round, I was much more willing to throw out ideas. I didn't get too attached to ideas that I did the year before. I was like, hey, let's just come up with hundreds and hundreds of ideas and then just sift through the madness and see, the best ideas from this group are probably going to be sweet. So, once we did that and we had our set, I think everybody going at AKD was like, this set is miles ahead of what we were last year. So, I think that's what kind of gave us a little bit of confidence. Going up against JJ, going up against KPGD, we felt like, maybe, this set is like something that at least people won't have seen before. People won't have seen a set like this. And so that was sort of, I think, the turning point, for us going from last year to this year, is that key idea in set design. Like Ram would even say something at the judges meeting after AKD that was also really meaningful, where he's like, the biggest thing that they do with set design is like show your set to your mom and ask her how many things that she remembers. Like that was like the best critique. Like that was the best feedback I've ever gotten. Like show your set to your mom, and if she remembers 10 things, you have a nasty set, right? And that was really true. Like once I finally showed my mom our blowout set from this year, like she remembered like 8 things, and I was like, yeah, man, we got a pretty good set this year, So I think that sort of idea of, it doesn't just need to be technical stuff. It has to be those big moments, those wow moments. We have to try and come up with some of that. And, once we started focusing on that, and instead of like just choreography, just technical stuff, I think we kind of like took off to a whole nother level.
Yeah, but you made an important point earlier that even though you recognize that, hey, like, maybe we're not going to execute this, like, that VCU, that style that VCU kind of set for collegiate teams and many teams followed for the years after, you still placed the heavy emphasis on making sure people had good form and they're executing well on stage. I think it's a really important point.
Right, and I think in some sense you have to have some sort of baseline. Like you can't win a dance competition if you don't have dancers. And everybody likes to like kind of, talk smack about like, Empire and stuff, about like how, oh man, they don't dance folk enough, or they don't dance, close enough to the roots of Bhangra. But, they all dance the same. And so that, in its essence, has to be there for your team. There's no replacement for synchronization. There's absolutely no replacement. There's nothing you can do to replace everybody looking the exact same, and that sort of impact that gives. So, in some respect, you have to teach how to dance. I think that first year that we weren't as successful in placing, but we learned how to dance, like, and dance well, 1 through 12. I think that was probably that was one of the most important reasons as to why we were good. Because, without that sort of year where we can spend just focusing on technique form, I don't think we're where we're at.
So obviously going into blowout this, at the end of the year, everyone was thinking, you guys are UNC, you guys are UNC. And, and then the final result was that, both you guys and UNC lost to Cal,
Yeah.
And, I don't know, like, I just kind of wanted, like, you don't have to obviously share the more personal details, but how did that kind of make you feel, because personally,
it's tough,
first comp that I ever went to and just watched. I've never gone as a pure spectator to a comp before, and me and many of the audience members at first glance were just like, wait, what just happened? Like,
right. I think that was our reaction too. I mean, like, what I had said before about there's no replacement for synchronization, I think that carries a little bit more weight. They made, like, I think, obviously I think we should have won. I mean, I'm the captain of the team. What kind of captain would I be if I'm like, oh yeah, we should have lost, But, I mean, I can see how they placed. It's very difficult not to place a team or to score a team high that does their set extremely well, right? I mean, like, what are you going to take off points for? Like, oh, they didn't do a good job. Well, yeah, of course they did a good job. They danced well. They had good formations. They executed the choreo properly. I mean, it's hard to knock them. And so, I think in the end, like, I thought the final result was going to be Buckeye/UNC, probably UNC. I thought they had a really good set, and then us, and then Cal. But I mean, the judging panel didn't favor set design as hard as I thought they would. I thought maybe we had a better set, but they had better dancing. So it's always a give and take. I mean, I didn't really mind the final placing, because I thought that we went out, we danced well, we tried our best. Like, I was proud of the performance that we were able to put on. So I did, however, like the fact that the rivalry aspect of the collegiate circuit was back in action, though, because there is nothing that I wanted to do more at practice than to beat UNC and Cal. Like, when we got to the show and we performed and everything was done and, whatever the placings were, I wasn't upset about it. But, like, at practice and leading up to Blowout, like, there was nothing that I wanted more than to just go up to Nashel with, like, a first place trophy in my hand and just pat him on the back and be like, better luck next year. Like, that was like the fantasy playing in my mind for, like, a couple months, like, leading up to Blowout. Because, like, we really felt it, like, every time we go to these competitions, you really wanted to beat UNC, you really wanted to beat Cal. And I think that's the only reason why, as teams, we improved throughout the year, all three of us. Like, I don't think there's any other reason behind that. Without, like, hard, intense competition, I think all of us kind of stagnate. But, in the back of your head, if you're like, oh, UNC's getting good, Cal's getting good, it only pushes you to get better. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
And so, you bring up that they're your friends and stuff, and it was a healthy rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
So, how was it to dance alongside some of these guys at Bruin 2016, and then
right.
And knowing that at the next Bruin you're going to dance alongside them again,
mm-hmm.
But you're going to spend the whole year competing against them,
Right.
Was that kind of like weird at all in any way?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I will say like this, like, people on the circuit are always like, oh yeah, man, like, if you want to have like they call it like the fire in the circuit, then you have to be antagonistic toward each other, where there has to be like some sort of animosity. But in my head, like, yeah, I want to compete against my enemies, but like, I want to compete against my friends way more than I want to compete against my enemies. Like, I want to beat my friends way, way more, because I know later I'm going to have to talk smack with them, like, all the time. Like, I don't want them to be like, oh, yeah, dude, who won Blowout? And I have to sit there and be like, you guys, So, like, that was honestly even more motivating. And maybe some people might be like, oh, that's BS or whatever, but I really believe it. It was like a sibling rivalry where every single time we see them, I know they're friends of mine, and I know I'm going to see them again. I know I'm going to dance with them. And I know I'm going to have to talk to them a whole bunch for the next year. And so I'd rather be on the better luck next time side than I am on the receiving end of that. So, I think that was really motivating. I enjoy dancing with them, but I mean, dancing alongside them just made me want to beat them more. And I think they would say the exact same thing. I don't think that they would pull any punches in that respect.
If I had to ask you, maybe, besides your team set from this past year, if there was a purely choreography-wise, so not execution, like you said, like purely choreography-wise, if any teams like really stood out to you from this past year, what would
From a pure choreo standpoint, and I don't think this is a unique opinion by any stretch, but I think Foliage at Big Ten was pretty cool to watch. I think that the like what they were able to do with 8 people was pretty nice, and very unexpected. UNC at Blowout, I actually do believe their set was really good, in terms of well choreographed. But after that, I think the list gets a little short. You know, I think Fertile had a pretty good year. First class was good at clutch, I think, from a choreo standpoint, but the rest of the year, I think they were a little bit more focused on, you know, dancer quality and things like that. So, you know, I hope next year we get some more variations that you know, I'll watch over and over again on YouTube. But as of this year, I think those are probably the main teams that really brought it in that respect.
Nice. And I guess, if you don't mind saying so publicly, were there any things, any particular segments, any trends from the past year, things like that you really did not like? You know, any pet peeves of yours?
Actually, I have a good one. One second. If Husky Bhangra is listening to this, I watched your Nashville performance, and I saw you use Ishperator Pave the same way that we did, and I want to say that hurt me. Because I saw their set, and they used our Dhamal song where we, like, you know, we wave our vests around and stuff, and they did like a similar Bollywoody step at the drop, and I was like, oh man, I was like, you can't do us like that. But on a more serious note, I think from this year, I don't think if you're a team that does a normal set anymore that you'll survive. I think that the circuit is moving too fast, and people want to see something they haven't seen before. And so, you know, I think teams that are coming to competitions with, like, I don't want to say cookie cutter sets, but, you know, I mean, that's essentially, you know, what it's come to with, you know, you have to be doing something different. You have to be doing something exciting. Or I think in the next few years you might get left in the dust. So, you know, if for anybody that wants to do pataka at every drop or do more cal in every sub segment, you know, maybe reconsider.
Any last words that you'd like to throw out?
One, I want a huge shout out to everybody on Buckeye this year, and in all past years. I know our team has a lot of OGs that aren't necessarily well known on the circuit, but I want to give all of them a shout out. We had a really great year, so you know, and most of the credit goes to them for creating a foundation. And then just, you know, everybody that's on the circuit from a collegiate standpoint that really brought it this year. You know, there were a lot of teams. You know, collegiate circuit's really coming back, and I know Buckeye isn't going to be a team next year, but the rest of the collegiate scene, I really hope to see it only continue to progress and only to continue to smack independent teams around at competition.
Most definitely. All right. So one thing we do want, you know, we're trying to encourage with the podcast and stuff is people reaching out to each other to get more help, you know, to kind of expedite the process for their own teams and stuff. So in the event, you know, someone who's in a similar situation to you, the captain who's rebranding their team or just wants some advice or just wants to say, hey, like, screw you, Nimit, like.
Oh, no, definitely. Hit me up on Facebook. I will 100% respond. Even if it's hate, like I will gladly talk smack with anybody. And one thing I definitely want to say is, like, when I, like, first started, I would just legit just cold call people. Like, actually, like, I didn't know them. I'd just seen them dance. I'd seen their team before, and I would just, like, hit them up on Facebook or, like, actually just call their phone. You know, just find their number from somebody and be like, hey, like, can I just talk to you a little bit about how you design your sets? And it was a little weird, but that was the best advice I'd ever gotten. You know, or some of it at least came from just hitting people up randomly and just being like, hey, like, this is our, like, you know, I'm looking to get better. You know, I'm struggling with this aspect. I don't know how to teach my dancers this, or I don't know how to, you know, choreograph segments like this and stuff like that. And I think that helped a whole bunch. So, you know, even if it, you know, if you don't want to hit me up, hit somebody up, because everybody on the circuit is usually out there to help. So.
Most definitely. So guys, so hit up Nimit, and also if you have any questions for Nimit that you want to, you know, post to the podcast, we'll probably do a follow-up episode, and Nimit's going to be, you know, hosting a lot of episodes as well. So comment on our Facebook page, on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, you know, whatever it might be. Please subscribe, leave a review. You know, the feedback always helps, and whether it pertains to this podcast or anything else you'd like to hear from us, just hit us up at the Bhangra Podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast, and we will be sure to take everything you say into consideration. Us up at the Bhangra podcast,